This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and you can see the title right on your screen. Cheating girlfriend became obsessed with me after I broke up with her. And this is a story about a young woman. She's been with her boyfriend for like 4 years. They've been getting along great. They both have great careers. And then one week, she goes off on a business trip, and let's just say she gets carried away with one of her coworkers. And guess what? Her boyfriend ends up finding out. So in this story, we're going to see how he handled the situation once he did find out. So let's get into it. And her boyfriend starts out, and he says, "I came here to post my story to help clear my head and to figure out my next steps." In summary, my girlfriend of nearly 4 years had a one-night stand with a guy while on a business trip. I was aware of this through a yet unknown source and broke up with her that same day. Ever since then, she has been stalking my every move. And I have to admit, I'm getting a little concerned for my safety. We are both in our late 20s and were introduced through a mutual friend. We clicked and started dating after exchanging texts and talking a few times on the phone. We shared many of the same interests, and there was instant chemistry between us. We dated casually for a little over 2 months before we both realized we were in love and officially declared ourselves a couple. Now, mister, let me just tell you something. You were not in love. You were in lust after 2 months. There's no way you were in love. She works for a national company whose name everyone would recognize. And I work as a double-E engineer for a company that produces manufacturing equipment. I'm purposely not giving specifics to maintain our privacy. We both earn good incomes and have great benefits. Even though we had been a couple for so long, we chose to live separately. Now, that is smart. You're going to find out here they were not engaged. They were just talking about getting married someday, potentially. So, unless you are engaged and you're getting close to the wedding, I don't think it's a good idea for couples to be living together. This was due to our offices being located on opposite sides of the city. Her apartment is about 10 minutes from her office, and my place is in the same development as my office. It's so close that I normally walk or bike to work and go home for lunch every day. While our apartments are miles apart, the drive takes less than 30 minutes during non-rush hour traffic. This enables us to spend a lot of time together even during the week. On the weekends, she's either at my place or I'm at hers. Our respective families loved us, and we were on an eventual track to holy matrimony. If this all sounds good, it was until suddenly it wasn't. I still can't believe what happened and how the deepest, most loving relationship of my life came to an abrupt end. Late last month, my ex and a group of employees from her office went to Dallas for an industry trade show. She attended events like this a few times a year and had been to this one before, so this was nothing out of the ordinary. While she was away like this, she'd always call me every night and we'd talk until it was time to turn in. On this trip, she did the same except on the final night. On that night, all the employees went out to dinner at a nice restaurant. Nothing eventful happened at the dinner. However, after dinner, the festivities carried over and they all went out for drinks on their own dime. She called me as she was walking to the bar, and we talked for nearly 20 minutes until she joined her coworkers at the establishment. I told her to have fun, and I'd talk to her tomorrow. To make a long story short, my ex ended up in a hotel room with a guy that night and gave him a blank, and you all know what that blank is. They may have gotten away with it, however, the guy foolishly recorded the act on his cell phone, and the video was sent to me anonymously 2 weeks later. I'm not going to go into all the particulars of how this mystery person got the video to me, but just know they did and without a trace. That evening, I drove to my girlfriend's apartment as we had planned, but instead of going there to enjoy dinner and a romantic evening, I confronted her with the video. Her reaction was not what I expected. When I played the video, she just watched without saying anything with her eyes glaring at the screen. After about a minute, I stopped the video and asked her if she had anything to say. Without looking at me, she just solemnly shook her head no while staring forward. With that, I got up and walked calmly out the door. Before leaving, I looked back and she was still sitting emotionless in the same position. There were no tears, no eye contact, no words spoken, and no attempt to stop me from leaving. It was like when she saw the video, she became totally zoned out. So the reason why she zoned out is because you caught her flat-footed. You surprised her with that video, she wasn't expecting it, and she didn't have an excuse for you. So instead of saying something, she just froze in her tracks. As I made the drive back to my place, I felt eerily calm, replaying in my mind what just happened. Like I said, it was surreal. Like this was a dream that I'd eventually wake up from. I actually slapped my face and pinched my arms a few times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I went home, had a light meal, and sat out on my balcony sipping a bourbon, reliving the past 4 years. Well, I'm glad he's sipping the bourbon instead of downing the bourbon. At around 10, I got a call from my ex's mother asking if I had seen her. I told her yes, advising I had been with her earlier in the evening. Her mother sounded relieved as she told me she had been trying to reach her, but she wasn't answering. Since she would eventually find out anyway, I decided to inform her mother that we had broken up. Hearing this, she became upset and asked why. I told her out of respect I'd let her daughter explain this to her. Judging by the way she responded, I think she realized her daughter had done something inappropriate as she didn't press me further. She instead told me she was going over to her place, and that she'd call me when she got there. I told her that wasn't necessary as we were no longer together. I then thanked her for treating me so well, and told her I was going to miss her and her husband. My ex's parents are good people, and I had grown close to them over the past few years. What I said came from the heart, and I got a little choked up. She also became emotional and told me this wasn't goodbye and that we'd talk again soon, but deep inside I knew our relationship would never be the same. While I may appear strong and unfazed by this, I assure you I've had plenty of weak moments since finding out. It's just that I've done all my crying and screaming when I'm home alone or driving in my car. That is very smart. That's where you want to show emotion. You want to work that out when you're by yourself, not in front of people. Throughout it all, I've not missed one day of work, and have also managed to keep a regular schedule at the gym. Doing so has helped me stay focused on the future, and again I gave him a thumbs up for that because that's what you need to do. Keep yourself in shape. Don't drink. Don't go out and party and do things like that to try to drown your sorrows. What you need to do is focus on improving yourself, and it looks like he's doing that. Before anyone asks, let me be clear. There's no way I'd ever stay with someone who has been unfaithful. This has always been something I felt strongly about, and my girlfriend knew this. That's good because you need to lay that out right up front. If you're going to get into a relationship with someone, you need to have that talk to say, hey listen, if you ever stray, guess what, our relationship will end immediately. He says, funny thing is, she told me this was how she felt as well. Obviously her sentiment had changed sometime during the past 4 years, and she just didn't bother to tell me. Jumping ahead to the day before yesterday, I got another call from my girlfriend's mother. This time she asked if I'd be willing to meet with her daughter to let her explain what occurred, and to give her some sort of closure. I told her I wouldn't meet with her, but out of respect, I would be willing to have a call with her, provided I could record the conversation. Again, that's smart. Don't get into a situation where you're alone with the person who cheated on you, because you don't know what she's going to do in that situation, and if you're going to have a conversation with her, always record it. Get their approval to do so first, and if they refuse, just say, okay, I'm not going to meet with you, we're not going to speak. That's how you need to handle those kind of situations. She thanked me and said she would have her call me. Keep in mind, since the day I broke up with my ex, she's not once tried to call me or text me. When I mentioned this to her mother, she told me she believes her daughter has had a mental breakdown. She said she's not been back to work since our breakup, and hasn't been leaving her apartment. Several hours passed, and I eventually went to bed. At a little past midnight, after I had just fallen asleep, I got a call from my ex. I groggily answered and said hello. She said hi, and I stayed silent. After about 30 seconds of dead air, I asked her why she called. She spoke up and said she just wanted to tell me she was sorry. I said, okay, I forgive you. She again went silent, likely being surprised by my response, and not knowing what to say in return. Yeah, because she really probably expected that you were going to give her a peace of mind, and what you did there was very smart, because you totally deflated the situation. You say, okay, I forgive you, I'm moving on, and that's it. I asked if there was anything else, and she said she wanted to explain what happened that night, so I have a better understanding of the situation. I told her that was not necessary, as the video told me everything I needed to know. After I said this, she started crying, and told me I didn't have the full story. She said she knows the situation looked really bad, but she could explain what happened. You know what, if I was him, I would let her explain this, because I'd like to hear how she could try to explain herself out of that one. Now, unless she was going to tell me that was her evil twin in the video, there was no way she was getting out of this, and I let her know that. I also told her there were no degrees to infidelity that were acceptable to me, and unless she tells me she was forced to do what I saw her doing, her explanation wasn't going to change anything. Before she could answer, I told her from what I saw in the video, she wasn't forced to do anything. From all appearances, it looked like she was the one who was driving the encounter. After I said this, she blurted out that it was a stupid lapse in judgment, and she is so sorry. She said it happened because they were both drunk. When all else fails, they blame it on the alcohol. While what she said was completely ridiculous, it was partially true. The guy in the video was drunk off his feet, but she definitely wasn't. He was slurring his words, and lost his balance several times throughout the video, while she appeared to be in full control of her faculty. I pointed this out to her, and she insisted that wasn't true. She said she was drunk, and had a terrible hangover the next day. By this time, I started to get agitated, so before I blew up, I told her I had heard enough, and ended the call. She tried calling me back multiple times, but I didn't answer. A couple hours later, after I had finally fallen back to sleep, I heard a key in my lock, followed by the sound of light knocking on my door. I had the internal deadbolt set, so the door wouldn't open from the outside. I knew it was her, before I even got up to look. When I did, I saw her standing there wearing a parka, despite it being 80 degrees outside. I didn't answer, and she stayed out there knocking for a good 15 minutes, before walking back to her car. While I was thoroughly disgusted with her, I still had concern for her well-being, as it was now after 3 a.m., and she was obviously in no condition to be driving. I decided to call her parents to let them know where she was. They arrived about 30 minutes later, and my ex's dad drove her car away, while she rode off with her mother. After this, I wasn't able to get back to sleep. Later that day, as I was walking to my apartment for lunch, I spotted her car parked out in front of my unit. Not wanting to get into a confrontation, I turned around before she saw me. While walking back to my office, I called her mother to let her know where she was. Her mother apologized, and said she would call her and have her leave. That evening, I went out to dinner and bowling with friends. I didn't get home until after 9, and was totally exhausted from a lack of sleep, and went straight to bed. At around 2 a.m., I was again awoken by the sound of knocking on my door. It was her again, this time wearing a white bathrobe. Rather than call her parents, I decided to call my ex on her cell. She begged me to let her in, as she wanted to talk to me in person. I told her we've already cleared the air, and I had forgiven her, so there was nothing more to say. She told me she wasn't going to give up trying, and she was going to come to my door every night until I let her in. So she's definitely now acting very crazy. I told her if she didn't leave, I was going to call her parents, and if she still refused, I would be forced to call the police. Well, that's what you should do. She cried and asked me why I refused to face her. I said, because there was nothing more she could say that would undo what she had done. She again started crying, but this time did so at a volume that could be heard by my neighbors. I called her parents and told them she was back outside my door and causing a disturbance. I told them I didn't want to continue bothering them, but if I didn't call them, I would be forced to call the police. They asked me not to do that, and requested I just keep calling them if she shows up. I said I would, but told them I don't know how much more of this I can take. They told me they would handle it. They once again came over and drove her away just as they did the previous night. The following day at work, I happened to look out the window around 11 and saw my ex drive up and park in a visitor parking spot. She got out and walked up to the front door, then walked back and got in her car. I didn't want her causing a scene for me, so I called her mom, but she didn't answer. I then tried her dad on his cell, and he answered. I could tell by his tone he was frustrated I was calling again. He apologized and said he'd take care of it and hung up. He apparently called her right after I spoke to him, as she drove away just a few minutes later. This was now getting a little unsettling for me, as I didn't want her impacting my job or causing issues with my neighbors. Also, it was starting to affect my health, as I hadn't gotten much sleep the past 2 nights. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for dinner. I stayed the night there, as it was my grandpa's 80th birthday, and we had a little party for him. We had a great time, and I got a full night's sleep. The next morning, as I was driving to work, I got a call from my ex's dad. I could tell right away he was upset. He accusatorily asked me why I called the police last night instead of calling him. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about and asked him to explain. He said last night someone called the police on my ex at 3 a.m. when she was outside my apartment. I told him it wasn't me, as I stayed at my parents' house last night. He apologized for his outburst, saying he just assumed it was me. Okay, here's what you do at this point with her father. You tell him, listen, this is the last time we're going to have a discussion about your daughter. The next time she shows up at my house or at my place of business, I am going to call the police, and I'm going to file charges, and then I'm going to get a temporary restraining order to keep her away from me. So you need to have that discussion with her and to straighten things out, because I'm not calling you or her mother anymore. He went on to say the police didn't cite her, but did put her through tests to ensure she wasn't under the influence. While I didn't say anything to her father, I'm really getting frustrated about this whole thing. I just want to be done with her without further incident, while still being respectful to her parents. Does anyone have any suggestions on what I could do to resolve this? Yes, I just told you what to do. I feel the only outlet I have for doing so now is to engage the authorities, but I really don't want to do that, as it would negatively impact her life and destroy my relationship with her parents. Help, he says. And that's the end of his original post, and now we're going to take a look at some of the responses he got back from the community. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button. That will help move this video up in the YouTube universe and get it seen by people across the planet. Now let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one is from a woman. She says, I know you must feel betrayed and angry with your girlfriend, but I would encourage you to give her the closure she's asking for, so that you both can go on with your lives. He's already moved on with his life. It's his girlfriend that's still trying to drag him back into the relationship that she destroyed. When I was 20, I had a single indiscretion with a guy while attending a party. My boyfriend found out and totally shut me out of his life. I've never fully recovered from that, even though it happened 9 years ago. He's moved on, but I'm still stuck living in the past, she says, crying. Next, here's a response from a guy. He says, I think you did the right thing by not meeting with her. You've got her on film performing an act, as you call it. How is she going to explain her way out of that? What you need to do is block her and her parents from everything and stop taking their calls. Amen. That's what you need to do. I know you said they're good people and you really like them, but when it comes right down to it, they are going to take their daughter's side no matter what she does. Bingo. What you have to remember with relationships is you don't have a relationship with her parents without her. Your relationship with her is over. Your relationship with them is over. Next up, we have another response from a woman. She says, from your description, it sounds like you had a great relationship before this happened. 4 years is a long time to be with someone to have it end so suddenly. Have you considered couples counseling or perhaps individual counseling first and then couples counseling? It makes me sad when I see young couples break up over stupid mistakes. Cheating is not a stupid mistake. It's a calculated decision, and even if it happened just one time, you had to plan for it. You had to put yourself in this situation to make it happen, and obviously she did that, so get out of here with that stupid mistake stuff. And finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, your only option at this point is to engage the police if she shows up again. I then suggest you file charges and obtain a temporary restraining order. I've unfortunately encountered too many situations like this in my line of work. I've seen plenty of times where a woman ends up flipping the script on the guy, accusing him of something in a last-ditch effort to hold on to him, or worse yet, causing him physical harm. Don't become a victim, and that's good advice from this guy here. That's a look at some of the responses he got, and now we're going to take a look at his final update, which came 53 days later, so a little over 7 weeks from his original post. He says, I'm back to give an update on the situation with me and my ex. I'd first like to thank those of you who responded to my original post. Your comments were both eye-opening and useful, and some were downright hilarious. I'll first start off and let you know that thankfully I've not had any further contact with my ex or her parents since my post. Now that's surprising because this is 53 days later and they've not been back in touch with him. I think her parents must have convinced her to stop pursuing me and focus on getting her life back on track. Since my first post, I've learned new information that is both baffling and mysterious. A few weeks after my last post, I got a call from the mutual friend who first introduced us. I hadn't seen or spoken to her in several months as she has been traveling a lot for work. She called me because she ran into my ex at the drugstore and she told her we had broken up. She called me to touch base and to see how I was doing. During our conversation, she let me know that my ex told her the guy she was with that night was a coworker at her company. While it doesn't make a difference, it was interesting to find out who the guy was, as up to this point I didn't know. The friend also let me know my ex was back to work and that the guy was no longer with the company. He was apparently let go for his actions, or I guess he could have resigned. Again, learning this was interesting, but it didn't matter anymore as I had moved on. The one thing that did concern me was my ex told her nothing was going to stop her from getting me back. Then last week, I received additional information from a surprising source. On Monday, I was contacted via Facebook by the wife of the guy in the video. She requested to speak to me as she had something important to tell me. I really didn't want to get involved, so I didn't respond for several days, but then she messaged me again stating it was urgent and she really needed to speak to me. When I called her at the number she provided, she proceeded to tell me that my girlfriend had an affair with her husband and she wanted me to know. I told her I already knew and that we were no longer together. She asked how I found out and I told her I got a video sent to me anonymously showing them together. Turns out, so did she. She said she's been trying to find out who sent the video ever since. She feels strongly that it came from someone at the company, possibly an employee in HR or security who had access to the data on her husband's company-issued employee phone. She said at the company she works for, they back up all text, pictures, and videos from employee phones to the cloud, then scans them for possible code of conduct violations. Now this is an important point this woman makes here, because a lot of people don't realize this who have company-issued phones. I would never use a company phone to conduct personal business, especially things like videos and pictures and text, unless you're comfortable with having what you're doing be seen by your company. He goes on, he says she said she believes this is how the video was discovered. She told me her husband was not only a cheater, but a total dumb F for using his company phone to record the video. Regardless of who sent the video to us, we are both very grateful for this person risking their job and a possible lawsuit by getting it to us. I'd love to find out who the person was, but likely never will. His wife told me after she found out she kicked her husband out and is in the process of filing for divorce. She said even though she has a good job, she's going to take him for everything he has as they have a 9-year-old daughter. She also told me she is on a crusade to get my ex fired from her job and has threatened to sue the company for discrimination since they fired her husband from his manager's job. So her husband was a manager and that's probably how they justified firing him and not her. She asked if I'd be willing to join her to get a little payback on my ex. I told her I wasn't interested, explaining I had moved on and wish my ex well. She understood but told me she's not going to drop this as she wants to do what's best for her and their daughter. She also let me know her attorney was looking into whether she could file a civil suit against my ex for breaking up their marriage. She said if our state law permits it, she will do so, explaining even if she doesn't get a penny, she wants to make her life miserable. So that's how things turned out. I thank God this ordeal is finally over and that I found out about my ex's true nature before we took our relationship to the next level. And that's the end of his story, and now I want to take a look at what I think are some of the morals of this story. The first one, establish cheating as a red line never to be crossed. He obviously did that with his girlfriend in this case, and she should have known better. Next point, never cry or show weakness in front of anyone. I've said this on multiple videos and this guy did a good job of controlling his emotions in front of people, but then when he was alone, he let loose and he would, I'm sure, scream and cry and do whatever, and that's perfectly fine. But don't do that in front of other people. Next, during a breakup, always put your well-being first. The one area where he did make a mistake is that initially he was really looking out for his ex's, well-being and just thinking about her first and also thinking about her parents and then putting himself last. You don't do that. Next point, for your safety, notify the authorities in cases of unwanted contact. These kind of situations can spiral out of control very quickly, and it's better to be safe than sorry. Next point, for your safety, notify the authorities in cases of unwanted contact. These kind of situations can spiral out of control very quickly, and it's better to be safe than sorry. Next point, don't waste time trying to take revenge on an ex. They eventually will get what's coming to them, and this guy, I think, handled that appropriately when the AP's wife, wanted him to get involved to kind of drag his ex-girlfriend down, and he said, nah, I'm past that. I'm moving on. I think that was the right thing to do. And then finally, move on with your life and focus on your future. Don't get drugged back into an old relationship or dig up the past. Move forward and make yourself better. So those are some of my thoughts on this story, and overall I think he handled the situation very well, all things considered. But now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think this guy handled the situation? Would you have handled things differently? Would you have sat down with your girlfriend face to face if she cheated on you and hear her out to give her closure? Or would you have handled things like he did? Tell us about that in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you on this video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only, and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services in consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, a channel that's listened to by men and traditional women all over the planet. Today we are back at you with another great video story, and you can see the title right on your screen, cheating girlfriend demoted to an occasional hookup partner. Oh no, let's get into this story and find out what it's all about. And this is the original post, and she starts out and she says, I'm writing this to see if my current relationship is worth holding on to. I want to start by saying that I accept full responsibility for what has happened in my life as it pertains to my boyfriend. I'm not trying to pass blame, only looking for advice from people other than my friends and family. I've created this new account and will be using fake names to keep things confidential. I'm 23, Zoe is her name, and my boyfriend is 23 as well, Zeke. Until recently we were exclusive, and I still am with him, but for the past couple months he's been dating other people. We met at college prior to the start of my junior year, his senior year. We clicked right away and started dating immediately. Zeke lived in the dorms while I lived off campus with two roommates who I'll be referring to as Dina and Crystal. I met my roommates after Dina posted an ad in our school newspaper looking for two female roommates to share a 3-bedroom apartment. I answered the ad, we met up, hit it off, and moved in together at the start of my junior year. We got along pretty well, even though we are so very different. Dina and Crystal are free spirits in every way, and she has that underlined, while I was far more reserved, very reserved actually. At first their behavior concerned me, but over time I found them both to have good hearts and to be fun to be around. I must admit though, I never fully accepted their lifestyles, and as such never fully trusted them. This wasn't a big deal during my junior year, as Zeke was still in school and he and I spent nearly every day together after school. We had a daily routine of studying, eating together, and being intimate. It was wonderful, and that year is probably going to go down as the best year in my life. After Zeke graduated, he landed a good job and moved to a city located about 90 minutes from our college. During this time, I traveled to his place every Friday evening and stayed with him until Monday morning, then drove back to school. During the week, I spent most of my time studying, as I was taking extra classes in order to graduate on time. My roommates were studying too, so we didn't hang out much except for Thursday evenings, which is kind of a big party night at our school. Well, I think it's a big party night at most colleges. We'd normally go out and eat somewhere and then go to a bar after and hang out and talk to people. I normally would stay for an hour or so and then head back to the apartment as I had an 8 a.m. class on Friday mornings. Dina and Crystal didn't have classes on Friday and would often stay out well after midnight or stay out all night. Neither of them had a steady boyfriend, so it was not uncommon for them to bring guys back to the apartment on Thursday and over the weekend. I didn't care as long as they were quiet and stayed in their bedrooms. This was a rule we all agreed to and they didn't violate it, though I could hear faint noises from their rooms if I didn't wear earplugs, which I often had to do. Both Dina and Crystal had multiple guys, who I guess you would classify as friends with benefits. Now, when I say multiple, I'm not talking dozens. Dina had 3 semi-regular guys she'd bring over and Crystal had 2. And what I say to that is, I mean, these women being with multiple guys at the same time. I'm not saying, hey, they're all hooking up together, but they're seeing this. Dina's seeing 3 different guys and this Crystal is seeing 2. That is just unsanitary and gross. She goes on and says, they also had one guy who I'll call Glenn that they shared between them. Not at the same time, but they both shared this guy individually. They knew it and were cool with it. Oh boy, you know what I got to say about these 2 women? I mean, they are STD factories. These kind of women, even though they may seem tempting because, they're going to give you that good stuff. I recommend just totally staying away from women like that because you don't want to go near them unless you have a full-body hazmat suit on. I mean, it's just too dangerous. Glenn was a junior and plays on the hockey team. He's not at all smart. In fact, he's a terrible student, but the athletic department works it out. So he somehow passes his classes. So this guy probably got a scholarship, I'm guessing, for hockey or some other sport and he's a terrible student. So they're just passing him along so that he gets to play hockey there. That's what I'm reading from this. She goes on and says, Glenn is not good looking in any sense, but he's tall and has an unnaturally muscular body. He's also known for having an attribute that is much more significant than other members of his gender. She says, I'm keeping things PG here. Dina and Crystal have been with Glenn multiple times. Now listen to this. She says, he basically has an open invitation to drop by whenever he wants, and if one of them is available, they will sleep with him. Both Dina and Crystal told me several times that he has expressed an interest in being with me too, though he never approached me. I, of course, rejected this and told them I was really offended by his suggestion. This brings me to what happened in May. It was a Friday. The school year had ended and it was our last night together as roommates. We made it through college. To celebrate, Dina, Crystal, and I made plans to have dinner and a little fun that night. I told Zeke all about it and he was fine with everything as he trusted me completely. I texted him all night letting him know what I was doing. Zeke and I had plans for a special celebration of our own Saturday night when I got to his place. Now back to Friday. We took an Uber to the restaurant and then, from the restaurant, we went to a campus bar where a lot of our friends were present. We stayed there until the bar closed, then Ubered back to the apartment. Though I normally don't drink, that night I did and way too much. I started with a banana daiquiri, but don't remember all the other things I drank except for the flute of champagne we all had to toast our graduation. I'd never been drunk before and didn't realize how much alcohol can affect your judgment. So you can already see she's pointing out what I'm about to do. It's probably because I was drunk. When we got back to the apartment, Dina, Crystal, and I sat in the living room and talked until their guys got there. When they did, they each went into their bedrooms. I was left all alone in the living room. I was so out of it that I flipped on the TV and decided just to curl up on the couch with a blanket and sleep there. I had just dozed off when there was a knock at the door. I went to answer and saw it was Glenn. Here comes Glenn with his big unit. I let him in and told him that Dina and Crystal were already in bed. He started towards Dina's room, but I told him that they both were already with someone. He said, bummer, and came into the living room and sat right down on the couch where I had been laying. He started talking to me about my plans after school and a bunch of other stuff. After about 30 minutes of talking, he kissed me. So she must have been sitting right beside him on the couch. Now, if he went and sat on that couch, why didn't she go sit somewhere else on a chair or somewhere? I resisted and explained my situation with Zeke. Glenn apologized, but said he wanted me desperately. I told him no. I was exclusive with my boyfriend. Do you think she really told him that? I wish I could say that's where things ended, but they didn't. We talked more and then he started kissing me again and this time I kissed him back. We didn't have sex, but I found out later that I apparently did do something to him that night. I fell asleep on the couch and Glenn left sometime during the night. In the morning, I woke up with a headache and the previous night was all a blur. Dina and Crystal were still in bed and their guys were gone. I made coffee and the smell woke them up. We started talking and laughing about last night. Then Crystal asked me how I liked being with Glenn. I didn't remember him being there, so I questioned what she meant. Now, she says right here, I don't remember him being there, but then she just told us that she remembers kissing him and him kissing her first. So, get your story straight. Crystal said Stacy, the guy she spent the night with, said she saw me giving Glenn blank and you know what that means she was giving him. I told her that wasn't true and said I just fell asleep on the couch. Crystal said, oh no you didn't. She said Stacy came back in her bedroom after using the bathroom and told her what I was doing. She said they both crept back out and watched me. At this point, I lost it and screamed at Crystal asking her why didn't she stop me. She said it was none of their business and that I was clearly enjoying myself. I told her I wasn't enjoying myself as I didn't even remember it. Crystal told me I was fully aware and was loving it. I started crying and begged them not to tell Zeke about this if they ever saw him again. They told me not to worry and they had my back. After this, I went in to take a shower and cried my eyes out regretting what I'd apparently done. When I got out, I called and talked to Zeke. He stayed on the phone with me while I packed up my stuff. Then Dina, Crystal, and I left the apartment at the same time and decided to grab lunch before leaving town. About an hour later, as the three of us were sitting at an outside table, I got a call from Zeke. He asked me if I was somewhere where I could access my phone. I said yes. He said he had something he wanted to send me. I asked him what it was and he said you'll see. He said to take a look at it and call him back to discuss it. I said okay and waited and waited. Finally, after we had all finished eating, I got a ping on my phone. I glanced at the message and couldn't believe what I saw. It was a picture of Glenn sitting on the couch without clothes with me kneeling in front of him. I was destroyed and just started crying. I didn't say anything to Dina and Crystal and just got up and ran into the ladies' room. They ran after me and found me crying in one of the stalls. I started screaming at Crystal, asking her how she could do something like this to me. She asked what. I told her about this picture. She swore she hadn't taken the picture and hadn't told anyone about me and Glenn. We then figured that it must have been Stacy but wondered how he found Zeke and why he would do this. Crystal said she told Stacy I was in a relationship but nothing more. We figured he must have found Zeke on Facebook or Instagram. Crystal said she didn't see him take the picture and said he must have taken it before coming back into the room. She said Stacy hates Glenn, so that might be why he did it. She said he probably did this to try to get back at Glenn somehow. I asked why would Stacy do this to me? I'm the only injured party as a result of this whole thing. So she's saying she's the only injured party, not her boyfriend who she just cheated on the previous night, but just she is the only injured party. They stayed in the restroom with me while I cleaned up and settled down. We then went back out and talked for another hour as they helped me contemplate what I was going to tell Zeke when I called him back. So she's saying we all were discussing how I could spin this story and get out of this mess I'm in. Eventually, I got back to my car and called Zeke. He answered and said hey. Initially, he didn't seem upset at all. I told him I was so sorry about the picture and for what I had done. I explained that I was drunk and couldn't handle it. I then told him that I honestly didn't remember doing anything with that guy in the pic. Zeke told me I looked wide awake and very enthusiastic in the picture. I started crying and kept telling him I didn't remember. He said okay and didn't say anything else, but I could tell he was getting emotional as his voice cracked. I told him I was going to start driving his way and he told me not to. I asked why and he said you know why. He then said he was breaking up with me. I pulled over and begged him not to do this. I asked him to let me come to his place and explain everything. He said what else is there to say? I told him I had a lot to say. With that, he said thanks for all the good times we had. Good luck and hung up. I called him back and he answered. I asked him to just talk to me and he again said there was nothing more to say and for me not to drive to his place because he was leaving for the rest of the weekend. I asked where he was going and he wouldn't tell me. I hung up and drove to his place anyway. When I got to his apartment, he wasn't there and didn't respond to my calls and messages. I waited in my car outside his apartment for over 2 hours before finally giving up and driving to my parents' house an hour away. On my way, I called my mom and told her what I'd done. So you told your mother everything? Oh boy. She screamed and yelled at me as I drove and I cried the entire way home. She called me a bunch of names and said she was ashamed of me. Mom did however agree not to tell anyone about this including my dad as he would never forgive me or see me the same way again. We decided to tell him Zeke and I just grew apart and broke up. That Saturday will go down as the worst day in my life. After I got to my parents' house, I talked to my mom for a while and then went up to my room and called Zeke. I explained to him that even though I was in that position in the picture, I didn't think I actually did anything. Oh come on. He interrupted me and asked me to stop lying, saying that he also had a 50-second video of me enthusiastically performing the act on Glenn. So she's totally busted here. I was so upset I just hung up on Zeke and let out a scream of desperation. My mom heard me and came running up the stairs as she thought I had done something to myself. I explained to her that I had just talked to Zeke and there was a video of me. My mom said we need to report this to the police as this is a crime. I told her I didn't want to as I didn't want the attention or embarrassment. I then decided to call Crystal and get Stacy's number. I called him multiple times and left him messages to call me back, but he didn't. Finally, I had enough and sent him a text and said I was going to report what he did to the police if he didn't call me back in the next hour. 5 minutes later, he called me back and started apologizing. I asked him why he did this to me and told him he ruined my life. He said he did it because he hated Glenn and also he felt that my boyfriend should know. I told him what he did was terrible and he could have just told my boyfriend without taking the picture and video. I asked him who he shared the media with and he swore to God that the only person he sent the images to was Zeke. He went on to say that Crystal knew nothing about the picture or video and that he found Zeke on Instagram after looking at my profile. I asked him to send me the video, but he refused, saying he was going to delete both the video and picture off his phone and off his cloud right then with me on the phone. I told him to send me a screenshot confirming this, which he did. He also sent me a text message apologizing and again saying he deleted the media. I responded with a text saying if I found out that he still had the images that I would file a police report and press charges against him. He called me back and swore that he had done so and again apologized. While I was not happy about the situation, I felt so much better and somewhat relieved after talking to him. So there I was expecting to be engaged sometime that summer and instead I was all alone due to a stupid lapse in judgment. During June and July, I tried everything to get Zeke back or at least talk to me, but he never responded. I was in a complete depression. Thankfully, during this time, I was able to land a job at a company I wanted to work at. This kept me going and helped me get through. I had reached a point when I had all but given up on trying to contact Zeke, but then I decided to call him on his birthday. I wanted to be the first person to wish him a happy birthday, so I called him at 12:01 a.m. and to my surprise he answered. I wished him a happy birthday and we talked for nearly 2 hours. I begged him for another chance or even for just one final time together for closure. He explained to me that there's no chance for us as a couple, but to my surprise said he would be interested in getting together one final time. So old Zeke wanted to get a little bit here. He said he missed my body but made it clear we would only have to do it for pleasure and nothing more. I was all right with this as I thought it was a good first step. Zeke then asked if I'd been tested and asked me to send him the results, which I did. He then told me to come to his apartment Sunday evening at 6 p.m. He said I should not pack a bag as I couldn't stay over, but we could spend a few hours together. I went and we had a wonderful time. It was both beautiful and passionate, just like we used to be, actually even better. Before leaving, I told him to call me whenever he wanted and I would drop everything and be there ASAP. So that's what I've done. Over the past 3 months we've gotten together 7 times, mostly on Sunday evening, but one time on a Tuesday when he had the day off. I thoroughly enjoy each time we've been together. I think it's because I love him so much, combined with the fact that no one knows we're seeing each other except he and I, which makes it feel like we're sneaking around. He's made it clear that he's seeing other women and I know he is, as I've seen pictures of him out with women on his Facebook and Instagram. He's explained to me that he'll never again take me on a date and to not expect anything more than we have today. So he's telling her right there, hey, I'm not even going to take you out on a date. All you're going to do is when I want it you can come over and we can hook up and then you're going to leave and that's it. Don't expect anything more. Hearing this hurt me, but I kept going back. Now listen to this. Before each of our get-togethers he makes me send him a text asking him if I can come over to have sex with him. Like a fool I do it every time. One day I forgot to and he wouldn't let me in his apartment until I sent him the stupid text. He said he does this to protect himself in case I try to falsely accuse him of something, which is ridiculous. This brings me to my dilemma. On one hand, I know I'm just being used, but on the other hand, I still have that connection to him and thus still have a chance. Ladies, what would you do if you were me? Have any of you been in this type of relationship, and how has it worked out? For the guys out there, I'd like to hear from you as to whether you think Zeke is just playing me, or if by him letting me back in his life, even for just physical contact, is a sign he wants me back. Thanks for reading my story, Zoe. So that's her original post, and now we're going to take a look at a few comments she got back from the community. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you're liking what you hear, hit that like button right now. That will ensure this video gets seen by people all over the planet. Now let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one's from a guy. He says, "Let me say you are a vile and disgusting person for what you did, and you deserve everything you're getting now. With that said, for your sake and for his, I think you should stop seeing him and go your separate ways. A real man will never forgive a cheating woman. He may keep you around a while for pleasure, but eventually he's going to dump you. Is that what you want?" The next response is from a woman. She says, "He's using you, can't you see that? Yes, you made a terrible mistake, but it's time he gets over it now and either accepts you or moves on. What he's doing now is a male version of monkey branching. He's just keeping you around to fill holes in his dating schedule, but one day he's going to find a woman he wants to settle down with and give you the boot. Get rid of him," she says. The next response is also from a woman. She says, "This guy sounds like a psycho and is definitely toxic." Okay, here we go. He actually makes you send an email asking him for S before he lets you in. That's insane. Stop doing that. Even if he stays with you, he's going to keep throwing your mistake up in your face. Do you want to live the rest of your life like that? Take this as a lesson learned and go out and find a guy who will love you for who you are. And we've got another response here from a woman. She says, "Stop giving yourself to him and getting nothing in return. See, it's all about transactions for a lot of these women. You need to be getting something back from him." She says he's treating you like a common S-worker without getting paid for it. You're worth so much more. Unless this guy knocks your socks off in bed. What are you getting out of the current arrangement? You could be putting all that effort into finding a great guy who will treat you like the queen you are. Good luck and keep us posted. And then finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, "I think you did more with Glenn than what you've disclosed here, and I think you remember every detail because it was always your plan." I have to agree with this guy. When I read this story for the first time, I said, "Is that all she did was give him up?" I think she did a hell of a lot more. He didn't just drop by that night. I think you invited him over. That's okay, because as women you control your body. Well, guess what? We men control who we get into relationships with, and if we don't see you as relationship material, that's our choice, and that's true. So remember that, guys. They control their bodies, but we control the status of the relationship. Now we're going to go through the updates that she has, and the first one was from just 3 weeks after her original post. She says, "I'm back to give a quick update. Against the advice that most of you provided me, I've decided to continue to see Zeke whenever he'll let me. I know I'm probably crazy for doing so, but I'm just not ready to give up on us yet. As a bit of good news, last weekend, instead of just wanting to see me on Sunday evening, he asked me to come over Saturday night too, and stay over Saturday and Sunday night. I couldn't believe it and was so excited. It was like a honeymoon of sorts, since it rained all weekend and we ended up staying in bed most of the time, and you know. So that's what I've got to share for now. Thanks again for the kind words and encouragement you've provided me. While I did get a lot of crude comments and hate from some lowlife, or should I say no-life guys, most of the responses I received were very thoughtful. Even those who said things I really didn't want to hear. I don't plan to update again, as I'm just going to concentrate on building my relationship with Zeke. Thanks again, and be well, Zoe. Well, she doesn't end there like she said. She wasn't going to update anymore because she comes back with a final update, and she does this 4 months after that last post. She says I wanted to come back with a quick update to let everyone know how things ended up for Zeke and I. I'm no longer seeing him. If you recall in my last post, I thought we were making progress, but then after I spent an entire weekend with him, he basically just ghosted me for the next month. I called and asked if I could come over, and he kept making excuses, saying that he had family things to do or that he had a work project and didn't have any free time. As it turns out, he was spending time with another woman. I found this out through doing some social media sleuthing. I found the girl on Instagram and saw all her posts of the two of them together. I was broken-hearted at first, but was willing to let this go, thinking now that he evened the score, we could be a couple again. Nope. The last straw was on my birthday. I expected him to at least call or text me to wish me a happy birthday, but there was nothing. I was so broken up about this that the following day I sent him a text saying I could no longer see him as it was tearing me apart. He just texted back okay. That was 3 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from him since. I think we're really done this time. I was devastated for a week and actually had to take time off work to mourn, but now I've decided to move on with my life. This weekend, for the first time in nearly 3 years, I'm going out on a first date with a guy my cousins set me up with. He's very cute and sounds super nice. We're going out on Saturday evening to grab a drink, and we'll continue with dinner if we hit it off. Wish me luck. I want to thank all of you for your messages, which helped me get through this difficult period. You don't know how much you helped me. Take care and be well, Zoe. So that's her story. Now I wanted to cover what I think are the morals of this story. The first one: if you live with pigs, you're bound to get dirty, and she starts living with these 2 wild women. Okay, let's just face it, these women were kind of off the charts wild. When you're around people like that and you're living in close proximity to them, eventually their behaviors are going to rub off on you, and look what happened to her. Number 2, a relationship without boundaries is not a relationship at all. She stepped over the line, of course, with this Glenn, and this guy, I have to say, handled the situation like he should have. He cut her off right then. Where he made a mistake is he started seeing her again. Now a lot of guys out there are going to say, hey, so what, she was just giving up the good stuff and she was basically just like a friends with benefits type situation. What's wrong with that? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with that, because she could have roped him back in. Number 3, guys should always, or I should say must always, wear protection and use dental dams. The pleasure is not worth the risk. Look at those 2 roommates of hers seeing multiple guys on a semi-regular basis, not to mention all the randos they probably took in as well, and then with her she just hooked up with this guy out of the blue. If that Stacy didn't take the picture in the video and send it to her boyfriend, guess what, her boyfriend would have never found out about this, and he could have hooked up with her right after. You know, when she got to his place the following night, I guarantee she would have hooked up with him. That's why I say, guys, always wear protection. And finally, number 4, don't try to repair a broken relationship. Instead, learn from your mistakes and do better the next time. That's all this woman in this story can do. Learn from her mistakes, even though I don't think what she did was a mistake. I think she planned it out. Learn from her bad behavior, maybe I'll say, and move forward and do better the next time. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Do you think that the guy in this story, the boyfriend Zeke, handled this situation right, or would you have done something different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you on. The car ride home was awful. Mark's relentless questions about my disappearance, laced with thinly veiled accusations, chipped away at my carefully constructed composure. And then, the cherry on top, Sandra moved in. Temporarily, Mark insisted while she finds her feet. Ha! Like that woman has ever needed help finding her feet. She's got stiletto heels, and she's not afraid to stab you in the back. Every nerve in my body is on fire. Mark has the kids upstairs playing the devoted dad after days of stony silence. Sandra glares at me from the kitchen, supervising dinner with military precision. You feeling better, Allison? It sounds like a concern, but it drips with sarcasm. Just a little overwhelmed, I manage. It's the closest I can get to the truth. That my entire world is collapsing. And these two are the architects of my destruction. Jake's been texting nonstop. He's worried, but there's a hint of desperation in his messages now. Wants to meet. Says it's urgent. I can't risk it. Mark's on high alert and Sandra's probably got hidden cameras in every corner of this damn house. The stifling normalcy of dinner is torture. Sandra's passive-aggressive comments about family supporting each other make my skin crawl. Mark offers empty platitudes about therapy, about giving our marriage one more shot. I want to scream. Doesn't he know he's the one who broke it all? Not just with the affair, but with the lies, the shady deals? That night, I lie awake, staring at the ceiling. I need a plan. I don't even know who the enemy is anymore. Sure, Sandra hates my guts. But is she behind the blackmail? Or is this all about Mark's tangled web of deceit? And how did Jake get pulled into this whole mess? I feel a flash of anger. At Jake for the recklessness of our affair. At Mark for being the reason I even looked elsewhere. But mostly, the rage burns inward. How did I become so blind, so complicit in my own misery? The blackmail emails haven't stopped. They've changed tone though. It's less about exposing me to Mark. More about the damage those revelations would cause him. Threats about financial irregularities. Hinting at his business dealings. So this isn't some jealous lover or scorned ex-employee. It's someone who knows exactly how to destroy him. Is that my out? I almost laugh. The wife. The scorned one. Becoming the unlikely savior. Exposing Mark's shady secrets might ruin me as well, but honestly, there's not much left to ruin. It's a risky game, and I'm already in way over my head. I desperately need an ally, someone I trust with my life. My gut tells me it's not Beth. Not anymore. She means well, but she's too loyal. Too quick to offer the practical solution. This mess needs something more drastic. Grace, the private investigator. She's sharp. Cynical. She'll get the kind of twisted satisfaction I need out of all this. The question is, can I trust her? She knows all my dirty laundry. Holds the evidence right in her hands. If I played this wrong, the kids. My heart aches just thinking about them. How the hell do I protect them when their own father, their own grandmother, are the ones tearing our world apart? I'm their mother. I'm supposed to keep them safe, but what if I make it worse? Sleep is impossible. My mind spins in circles, every scenario ending in disaster. I need clarity. A decision. And then it hits me. Jake. He was there at the beginning. He has a stake in this, whether he admits it or not. Yes, he messed up big time, but if there's one person who understands this level of desperation, it's him. I glance at the clock. It's past 2 a.m. Screw it. I slip out of bed, careful not to wake Mark, and grab my phone. My fingers tremble slightly as I type out the message I've been avoiding. We need to talk. Tomorrow. It's life or death. My heart thuds in my ears as I stare at the computer screen. The sender is masked behind a string of random numbers and letters, yet their intent is crystal clear. It's confirmation. My tormentor knows about Jake. They know everything. I sit motionless, paralyzed by a strange mix of fear and morbid curiosity. Should I open it? Is it another twisted trap filled with photos and accusations to ensure my complete devastation? A wave of nausea hits. Maybe ignorance would have been better. But now I need to know exactly what I'm facing. My finger hovers over the mouse. Do it. A dark voice whispers insidiously. Don't be a coward. My pulse quickens as I click. The email is short, sinister. No graphic evidence of my affair, just meticulously detailed accusations. Dates and times of my rendezvous with Jake. Descriptions of our usual meeting spots. There's even an unsettling mention of the tattoo on his shoulder. The one I foolishly confided in him about. This isn't the work of an amateur. Then a veiled threat. They promise to reveal all to Mark, but only as a last resort. The implication is clear. Cooperate or face total destruction. But cooperate? How? What the hell do they want from me? Money? No, that feels too simple. This person, whoever they are, enjoys their cruelty. It's about power, control. And they have it all. I'm their puppet now and I don't even understand the play. A chilling thought strikes. What if they don't reveal the affair? What if they set Mark up somehow, pin a crime on him? The blackmail emails hinted at Mark's shady business dealings. Could this be an elaborate revenge scheme? One where I'm just collateral damage? My phone bursts to life. It's Jake. Relief washes over me for a second. And then I remember the urgency of his earlier message. His voice is a panicked rush when I answer. Barely a greeting. Someone reached out to my brother. They know about us. They want money, Allison. A lot of money, he spills out. My stomach churns. How did they find him? How did I trail off, the enormity of it crushing me? I don't know, could Mark have someone tailing me? Or I don't even know who would do this. Jake sounds close to tears. His desperation fuels my own, but I force myself to think. What did your brother say? To meet tomorrow. A secluded spot outside town. I told him I'd bring cash. Don't go, I snap back. It's dangerous. We need to go to the police. You're kidding, right? Cops? They'll expose our affair. Besides, this isn't some random mugging. Whoever's behind it is too connected. They'll know if we go to the authorities. His words hit uncomfortably close to home. There's a twisted logic in it. One that speaks to the kind of people we might be dealing with. So what do we do then? Just give them money. I can't even get that kind of cash, I say, panic bleeding into my voice. The silence on the line stretches. It's the unspoken truth. Neither of us has any answers. I'll meet them. I need to try and reason with them. But you, Allison. Jake's voice trails off, a mixture of fear and reluctant acceptance. I know I need to disappear, I say it hollowly, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. Where do I even go? How do I explain this to the kids? Mark's footsteps coming up the stairs snap me back into the present. I slam the laptop shut, my movements frantic. Just another day in my perfect crumbling world. My fingers tremble as I open the cabinet under the bathroom sink. My emergency stash, not the first aid kit, but the other one. The bundle of wrinkled cash I painstakingly collected. Birthday money from my parents I never spent. Forgotten checks from distant relatives. It's pitiful. Nowhere near what Jake's blackmailer demanded, but it's all I have. Pathetic. That word circles my mind like a vulture. It applies to almost every aspect of my life right now. It's pathetic that this is the best I can do. It's pathetic that I even entertained the idea that running away was a solution, let alone a practical one. Yesterday I called in sick to the soup kitchen. I spent the entire day packing a single small suitcase and making heartbreaking to-do lists for Mark. School pickup schedules, the vet's number, reminders about the allergies. It was like penning instructions for my own erasure. Mark was strangely solicitous, asking about my doctor's appointment and suggesting takeout for dinner. His guilt, or more likely his desire to regain control, is suffocating. I'm starting to see why people in these situations just cave. Give in to the blackmail. It'd be easier. Maybe I'd get some peace. A few months before the next demand, the next escalation. But the thought of rewarding this monster, this shadowy figure destroying me from afar. No. There's a flicker of defiant anger left in me, and I'm going to cling to it with all I've got. Beth calls. She's been relentless, a lifeline in this self-imposed isolation. You okay? Any word from Jake? Yeah, I force myself to say it out loud. Maybe then it'll feel more real. I gave him the money, all I could find. He's meeting them today. There's a beat of silence. Allison, that's crazy. This won't end, you know that, right? Beth's voice is sharp, frustration bleeding through. She's not wrong. What else could I do? Sit and wait for them to turn up on our doorstep? At least this way, maybe Jake can figure something out. I try to sound convincing, but even to my own ears, it rings hollow. Beth sighs. I'm heading over. This whole thing is a mess, but you shouldn't deal with it alone. Her tone softens slightly. She's a true friend, sometimes to a fault. Her loyalty has never wavered, not even now when I'm at my least deserving. When Beth arrives, my kitchen counter is transformed into a makeshift war room. My laptop is open, displaying maps of the secluded area where Jake's meeting is supposed to take place. Beside it, Jake's cryptic text with the location details. I've been staring at it so long, the words blur and warp. What about Grace, your investigator? Can she trace the phone? Beth asks after surveying the scene. No luck. Whoever's behind the blackmail is good. It's either a burner or routed through so many proxies it's pointless. I wave a hand in frustration. I'd half hoped Grace might uncover something, anything to give a name to this faceless torment. Beth bites her lip. She knows I'm out of options, that I'm placing an impossible amount of faith in Jake and his ability to manage a situation he's ill-equipped to handle, yet she doesn't voice the obvious. We drive. It's the middle of the day, the road's busy with ordinary, unremarkable lives. I should be at school pickup, wrangling the kids into the car for soccer practice. Instead, I'm about to witness the fallout of one disastrous decision, its consequences rippling outwards in ways I can't even predict. The area Jake described is exactly as sinister as it sounded. Abandoned warehouses, overgrown lots, the relics of some failed industrial project. We park a safe distance away, using binoculars to scan the desolate landscape. Do you see him? I try to keep my voice steady, but the binoculars tremble in my hands. There. A flicker of movement outside a crumbling, half-built structure. It's Jake. My heart sinks. He's alone. My hands squeeze the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turn white. We're too far away to see clearly, but the tension between Jake and the figures looming over him is unmistakable. One, burly and menacing. Another, smaller, concealed beneath a bulky hoodie. Neither faces us. A calculated move, likely intentional from whoever set this up. Jake's an idiot, Beth mutters beside me. He should have never gone alone. A surge of guilt washes over me. Yes, it's a stupid risk, but he's doing this because of me. Because I was too cowardly to face the consequences of my actions. My stomach twists as I consider if this goes wrong, Jake might pay the price for my mistakes. We watch helplessly. The figures approach Jake, forming a semicircle. One of them gestures threateningly. They're too far for us to hear the words, but the intent is clear. It's enough to break the fragile dam holding back my panic. I can't just sit here. I almost shout, my voice raw. I fumble for the car door handle, but Beth grabs my arm. Allison, stop. We'll make everything worse. Look. Her sudden urgency forces me to focus. Jake is holding out the envelope with the cash. The exchange happens quickly. Money for silence. The figures turn to leave. It seems anticlimactic. A tense, terrible moment hanging in the air, and then it might just be over. Relief washes over me, but it quickly curdles into suspicion. This feels too easy. My tormentor, whoever they are, enjoys playing games. Would they really just take the money and disappear? The answer comes a moment later. Jake is on the ground, doubled over. One of the figures, the burly one, kicks him viciously. The other stands by, almost casually, as if this is part of the agreed-upon deal. I feel sick watching the assault unfold helplessly from afar. Oh my God, he's going to kill him. Beth's voice is a terrified whisper. I don't stop to think. There's only a primal instinct taking over. I throw the car into reverse, slamming my foot on the gas pedal. The tires squeal as I tear out of our hiding spot, aiming straight for the scene. Beth screams my name, but it's lost beneath the roar of the engine. I see the assailants scramble as the car hurtles towards them, but my focus is solely on Jake. I have to get him out of there. I can only imagine the thoughts racing through those men's minds. A surprise attack? A woman scorned coming to the rescue? I prey on whatever sliver of rationality they have left that it's enough to make them retreat before things turn truly deadly. The chaos happens in a blur. Screeching tires, shouts, Jake scrambling towards the car, Beth's panicked voice in my ear, dust and fear clogging my throat as I gun the engine and swing the car around in a whiplash turn. I don't see the men again. Jake stumbles into the passenger seat, clutching his side and gasping for breath. We speed away, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay, I babble, glancing at Jake. He's bruised, bleeding slightly, but alive. That's the only thing that matters right now. My hands still shake from adrenaline hours later, driving Jake to a discreet urgent care clinic. My thoughts were a chaotic jumble. We concocted a story about a mugging gone wrong, vague enough to explain the bruises without arousing too much suspicion. We didn't stick around long enough for questions. Get some rest, I tell him, as I drop him off in a dimly lit part of town. I'll check in later, stay off your phone for a while. He nods numbly, the fight gone out of him. We both know this is far from over. Back at home, an eerie normalcy descends. It's like the eye of a hurricane, a temporary lull before the true destruction. Mark fusses around me, a strange mix of anger and misplaced concern. He questions my erratic behavior, my unexplained trip to the doctor. I offer short replies, feigning exhaustion. He doesn't buy it entirely, but plays along for now. Sandra, ever the opportunist, swoops in under the guise of supporting the family. She cooks, cleans, casts suspicious glances my way. The kids look on, a mixture of confusion and relief. Domestic order is restored, even if the foundation it rests on is rotten to the core. My phone buzzes. It's Grace. I rush to the bathroom, locking the door behind me as if that offers any real privacy. You need to see this. Grace's voice crackles through the speaker. She's usually unflappable, but there's an urgency in her tone now that sends a shiver down my spine. Tell me, I almost whisper, bracing myself. I trace the blackmail emails further than I thought possible. Multiple redirects, dummy servers, the works. But they slipped up, left a trace. The IP resolved to a residential address. My pulse quickens. Whose address? Your mother-in-law's. The words slam against me like a physical blow. No, it can't be. Sure, Sandra hates me, but this? This is something else entirely. Her hatred is petty, vindictive. This calculated torment, the threats against Jake, the connection to Mark's shady dealings? It doesn't add up. Are you sure? I managed to squeak out. There has to be a mistake. Positive. No room for error. I'll send you the full report. The call ends abruptly. I stare at my reflection in the mirror. Is this what I've become? A stranger to myself, trapped in a house of horrors, surrounded by monsters disguised as loved ones. The trail cuts deeper than any blackmail threat. I feel a white-hot rage consume me, not towards Sandra, but towards Mark. His lies, whatever darkness he's hidden from everyone, all of it facilitated my blind complicity. Maybe Sandra is my tormentor, motivated by a twisted desire to punish him through me. It's almost laughable. I'm caught in the crossfire of a war I never saw coming. Beth arrives later that evening, armed with takeout and a bottle of wine. I don't even try to protest. We sit on the couch in my perfectly manicured living room, surrounded by the trappings of a life I no longer recognize. So what's the play, do you tell Mark? This can't continue, Beth says after a long, contemplative sip of her wine. I don't know. I stare at my reflection in the wine glass, the liquid swirling inside. It's not a question of if, but when, everything will shatter. For the first time, I see not only the wreckage of my life, but also the possibility of rebuilding amidst the ashes. I wake to the sound of rain. The steady drumming against the cabin's roof should be soothing. Instead, it mirrors the relentless chaos raging in my head. I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind a tangled web of accusations, revelations, and desperate plans. I replay Grace's report over and over in my head. Sandra's accounts, the money trail, it all points to Jake's mysterious cousin. I still can't wrap my brain around it. Jake, my lover, turning into another villain in this twisted story? Beth texts with an update. More news coverage. Mark making public pleas for my return. Photos of the kids plastered on local newsstands. Pawns in a desperate bid for sympathy. Sandra, surprisingly, is silent. Is it calculated strategy, or did I misjudge her role in all this? My phone buzzes. It's him. Jake. We need to talk. His voice is a raspy whisper, filled with desperation and something else. Fear. Where are you? I try to keep my voice steady, but a tremor of anticipation runs through me. The end of the blackmail, or another trap? The park. The one we used to meet. Please, Allison, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. His voice trails off. A plea hanging heavy in the air. Intuition, or is it foolishness, pushes me to agree. Despite everything, there's a flicker of hope. Could this be a way out? Could Jake hold the answers, not as a perpetrator, but as an unexpected ally? The rain has stopped, leaving the park eerily empty. The swings creak in the breeze, a chilling soundtrack to my solitude. I perch on a bench, scanning the paths for any sign of Jake. There. A familiar figure emerges from the thinning mist. My heart thuds against my ribs as he approaches. Jake looks disheveled, haunted. He collapses onto the bench next to me, burying his head in his hands. I'm so sorry, he chokes out. For all of it, he explains, his voice gaining strength as he pours out the sordid truth. His cousin, a low-level grifter caught in mounting debt. The blackmail scheme that spiraled out of control. Not a grand plan, but a desperate act fueled by greed. Jake was meant to be little more than a pawn, a believable target for my affections. He never dreamt it'd escalate to threats of physical harm, or that my tormentor would turn her sights on him as well. Claire. I say her name aloud, a bitter taste in my mouth. She used you, Jake nods, shame etched across his face. She knew about my debts, knew my weaknesses. Promised a quick fix, a way out. Said you were an easy mark, a lonely rich housewife? My hands curl into fists. Betrayal slices through me, from Claire, from Jake, from my own blindness. Mark has to know, I mutter, more to myself than to Jake. It's a desperate act of self-preservation now. Mark's secrets are my shield, a weapon to wield against this woman who wants to destroy us both. Are you sure? Jake's voice holds a flicker of hope, a selfish desire to keep his own sins hidden. It sparks a flicker of disgust within me. We're all ruined anyway, I say grimly. Let's at least try to control how the wreckage falls. And with that, a plan forms. A risky, desperate plan with no guarantee of success. But what choice do I have? Other than to remain a pawn in someone else's vicious game? My hands feel clammy as I push open the heavy door of the police station. The sterile lights, the smell of stale coffee, it all brings back a visceral wave of nausea. I was here just days ago, but I feel like a different person. Stronger, hardened, stripped of the naivete that got me into this nightmare. Detective Carter greets me, his expression a careful mix of weariness and something approaching grudging respect. Mrs. Thorne? He nods curtly, gesturing toward an interrogation room. Even my name feels foreign now, a relic of a life that no longer exists. He lays it out. The charges leveled against Mark, the damning evidence, Claire's confession outlining the web of deceit. He spares me the gory details, but it's clear Mark's fall will be swift and complete. Sandra's fate is less certain, her role more calculated, hidden behind shell companies and plausible deniability. Questions follow, relentless and sharp, digging into my affair with Jake, the depths of my willful blindness. There's judgment in the detective's eyes, but also a flicker of understanding. A woman caught in her own gilded cage, fighting for survival with the only weapons she knew. Walking out of the station, I don't feel vindication, just a dull exhaustion. There's no winning here, only degrees of loss. I head straight to Mark's sprawling office, the place that was once the symbol of his success, now a target for media vultures and bankruptcy lawyers. He's hunched over his desk, a broken figure. The hatred radiating from him is palpable, but for the first time, I don't cower from it. How could you? He spits out. I gave you everything. Everything was a lie, Mark, a house of cards built on stolen money and other people's ruin, I retort, my voice steady. There's no room for his self-pity, not when my own life is in shambles. The fight leaves him, replaced by a bitter resignation. I watch him sign papers I only half understand, legal jargon that translates into a future far less lavish than the one I was promised. There's a small satisfaction in seeing his world crumble, a sliver of justice in his downfall. Beth is my lifeline through the ensuing chaos. We spend countless nights poring over documents, deciphering legal strategies. She's both my lawyer and my rock, a constant in a world devoid of any familiar ground. My children, their faces haunt my sleepless nights. Too young to understand, old enough to sense the brokenness. Shared custody becomes a battleground, Mark wielding their hurt as ammunition against me. It's a pain unlike any I've ever known, the guilt of my choices cutting deepest now. The volunteering starts as an act of desperation, a need to fill the empty hours, to feel some kind of purpose besides untangling a lifetime of deceit. The victims' support group is where I end up, women and men, their eyes mirroring my own haunted desperation. Their stories unfold in hushed tones in sterile meeting rooms, stolen inheritances, retirement funds gambled away, betrayals that shatter families. Listening, I see the human cost of Mark's greed. I help where I can, small gestures against an ocean of suffering. There's no redemption in it, only a desperate grasping for a way to make amends, to rebuild myself from the inside out. 1 year later, sitting in a crowded coffee shop, I see him. Jake. He looks older, thinner, a shadow of the man I thought I knew. I freeze, unsure if I should hide, run, or face him head on. He notices me, a flicker of recognition, hesitation. Then he walks over. Can we talk? He asks, his voice hoarse. Awkward silences stretch between stilted apologies. Shared regrets are spilled alongside bitter truths. We dissect the wreckage of our choices, knowing neither of us deserves absolution, perhaps not even forgiveness. As he gets up to leave, a strange understanding settles between us. There's no promise of a second chance, of rekindled passion, only a shared acknowledgement of the storm we both weathered and the uncertain paths that lie ahead. My walk home is solitary. The future is still hazy, fraught with custody battles, uncertain finances, and the lingering sting of betrayal. But for the first time in a long while, I feel a sliver of hope. Not for a fairy tale ending, but for something real, something built on the shattered remains of the life I once knew. Because at the end of it all, that's all I have left.